God bless you. Day number 3 of the Better is Possible challenge. Have you heard people say this? I am my own worst critic. I am my own worst critic. You may have said that yourself. I probably have said it somewhere in the past because it seemed like a common thing to say. But it's really a harmful thing to say. It's really a harmful way to approach yourself or to self-examine yourself. And so recently I heard someone say that, man, I'm my own worst critic. And I stopped them and I said, well, how could that be? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, do you know what it takes to be your own worst critic? And they said, well, explain more. So I went on to explain. I said, out of all the billions of people over in the world, all over the country, all over the world, how did you manage to be your own worst critic? That means you had to fight all the billions of people and fight through all of them to become your number one critic. Do you see how that sounds? You are when the person says I'm my own worst critic, they have to do so much to become number one at condemning themselves and criticizing themselves. In 2024, we have to start approaching even dealing with ourselves in a better way. We need to show ourselves some grace, some mercy, and stop having expectations that we can't meet. And then when we fall short, we think it's the end of the world. You have to be satisfied with 100% of what you do. Be satisfied doing 100%. You don't have to live and being your own worst critic. You don't have to walk around condemning yourself. And as a counselor, when I discuss with people on affirming themselves with positive words and looking at some of their positive traits, people struggle with seeing the positive things about themselves. And I often have to name the positive things that I see in them to help jumpstart them into really seeing themselves in a positive light. We all know the negative things. We all know things we need to improve on. And those are the things we're always working on. But what should help us work on those things is to know that we also have some good things. We need to use the good things about us, the positive things, the strength that we have to give us hope to know the struggles that we have can be overcome because we do have positive things that we're working in. And so when you hear people say, I'm my own worst critic, or even when you see yourself saying it, I want you to catch yourself and say, you know what? I'm not my own worst critic. Because it takes too much. You know how much effort it takes to be number one at criticizing you? You got a billion people in the world, and you manage to be number one at being your own worst critic. 2024, we're not going to live in that condemnation. We're not going to live in guilt. We're not going to live in shame. We're not going to live in over critiquing ourselves. There is a healthy critique. There is a healthy critique that has grace and it has mercy in it, where you examine yourself and you see where you can improve from a healthy mindset. But when you live in condemnation and you live in guilt and you live in shame, you're going to become your own worst critic. And you know what's funny about that? When people are their own worst critic, it's hard for them to receive anything positive from others. When others compliment them, it's hard for them to receive it because they're not used to hearing anything positive, because they spend most of their time criticizing and over critiquing themselves, that they begin to believe themselves as the final judge about themselves versus others who may see positive things and want to encourage them. And so this year, 2024, we're going to leave that being our own worst critic. That doesn't make sense. That makes sense that I'm the best at what I do at criticizing me. Criticizing yourself. That doesn't make sense. See how that sounds? I'm number one at being my worst critic. And one other thing in that is, when you're your own worst critic, you don't know when to stop. Where are the boundaries at? Where does mercy and grace kick in? So when you become the best at criticizing yourself, it's hard to know when to stop, because you're going to look at everything as if you didn't give your best. Even when you won, even when you win at things, you're still criticizing yourself, saying, I should have did better. I could have did this. So you can't even enjoy success or winning for self-critiquing yourself to the point of undermining your award or your goal that you accomplished. So 2024, we're not going to walk in that anymore. We're not going to do that. We're going to live and thinking positive about ourselves. We're going to ask God to help us to see us through the lens of his love. And we're going to start loving ourselves through his love for us. And so I want to encourage you, never be your own worst critic.